Welcome back to Retro Laws, where the unknown become known. In tonight's story, we're stepping into the fog to uncover the forgotten tragedy of the ship named the Orpheus. We will explore how a glowing red stone shattered lives across centuries. Chapter 1: The Ash and the Astral Stone. The story of Echo Knight begins not on the cold open ocean, but inside a quiet, lonely city apartment during the late 1990s. The main character is a young man named Richard Osmond. Richard receives a cryptic letter from his estranged father, Edward Osmond. Edward had been missing for several weeks without leaving a clear trace behind. The letter is short, frantic, and deeply unsettling. It begs Richard to come to Edward's old apartment right away. The message warns that a terrible force is waking up and that time is running short. When Richard arrives at the rundown apartment building, the air feels heavy with decay. The hallways are silent, save for the hum of flickering fluorescent light bulbs. The carpet is worn thin and dust floats through the stale air. This mundane setting serves a very specific storytelling purpose. By starting in an ordinary, believable apartment, the game grounds the player in real-world normalcy before pulling the rug out from under them. You feel like a detective investigating a family mystery, not a hero entering a supernatural horror game. Richard steps inside his father's study and finds a scene of utter chaos. Books are scattered across the hardwood floor. Old newspaper clippings are pinned to the walls with thick brass tacks. Drawn curtains block out the city lights, leaving the room bathed in soft, moody shadows. As Richard searches through his father's desk, he finds a series of handwritten journal entries. The notes detail Edward's growing obsession with a rare artifact known as the Astral Stone. The journal speaks of a red gem with unnatural properties, capable of granting immense power while corrupting the souls of anyone who touches it. Beside the journal lies an antique painting depicting a massive ocean liner sailing through a misty night. Attached to the corner of the frame is a small piece of glowing red crystal. As Richard reaches out to inspect the fragment, the ambient silence is suddenly broken. A sudden explosion shakes the entire building. Bright red flames erupt from the floorboards, rapidly swallowing the curtains and wooden furniture. Smoke fills the room in seconds, turning the air thick and choking. The exit door slams shut, locked tightly by an unseen force. In this moment of extreme panic, the glowing stone fragment begins to pulse with an intense, fiery light. The red glow expands, completely covering the smoke and flames around Richard. The sound of crackling wood begins to fade away, replaced by the deep, rhythmic churning of water and heavy machinery. The intense heat of the fire transforms into a freezing sea breeze. When the blinding red light finally clears, Richard is no longer standing in a burning city apartment. He is standing inside the wood-paneled cabin of a grand, luxurious steamship. This dramatic opening scene sets up the core emotional anchor of the entire narrative. The fire represents the destructive nature of the Astral Stone itself. Fire consumes everything it touches, leaving behind nothing but cold ash and bitter memories. Edward's obsession with the stone lit the fuse that destroyed his family home. Now, Richard is left to pick up the pieces among the ashes. The burning room acts as a bridge between two distinct time periods, tearing Richard out of the modern era and casting him into the past. From a game design perspective, this opening sequence highlights the genius of From Software during the 32-bit era. In 1998, 3D graphics on the original PlayStation were still quite primitive. Developers could not rely on photorealistic character models or high-resolution fire effects to scare players. Instead, From Software used harsh contrast, careful light placement, and oppressive sound design to build tension. The sound of crackling fire was recorded with a sharp, dry audio profile that made the flames feel uncomfortably close to the player's ears. The technical architecture of the game was built on an upgraded version of the engine used for King's Field from Software's famous first-person role-playing series. However, while King's Field focused on crawling through dark dungeons and swinging swords at skeletons, Echo Knight shifted the camera's perspective toward narrative immersion. By keeping the view strictly in the first-person perspective, the player experiences Richard's disorientation firsthand. When the room catches fire, you cannot look around easily. You must physically rotate your camera in slow, deliberate movements, mimicking the clumsy panic of a person trapped inside a smoke-filled room. The mystery deepens when we examine the origins of the astral stone within the game's lore. The stone is not merely a magical rock, it is a sentient parasite that feeds on human desire. Throughout human history, the stone has appeared in different forms to individuals consumed by ambition, grief, or greed. It promises to fulfill their deepest wishes, but it demands a terrible price in return. To unlock the full power of the stone, the wielder must offer up human souls. The stone drives its owner to commit horrific acts, trapping the victim's spirits in a state of eternal torment. Edward Osmond did not stumble upon the astral stone by accident. He had spent years tracking its movement through historical records, desperate to understand what happened to his family's bloodline. The Osmond family possessed a natural resistance to the stone's mental control, making them the only people capable of destroying it for good. However, this resistance also made them prime targets for the corrupted souls bound to the stone. Edward realized that his time was running out, which is why he hid the stone fragment inside the painting and left the urgent message for his son. During the late 1990s, word of mouth about Echo Knight spread across early internet forums and playground rumors in a very peculiar way. Because the game received a limited production run in Western markets, many players only ever encountered it as a rare rental at local video stores. The box art featured a mysterious, shadowy face against a stark black background, offering very few clues about what was inside. Rumors began to circulate on early message boards that Echo Knight was a secret spin-off of Resident Evil or a lost prototype for a new horror engine. Some players even claimed that playing the game late at night could cause weird glitches or corrupt memory cards due to its strange save system. In reality, these community urban legends were fueled by the game's unusual structure. Unlike most survival horror titles of the era, which relied on jump scares and zombie battles, Echo Knight offered a slow, melancholic burn. Players who expected a high-action monster shooter were met with a somber ghost story where combat was entirely non-existent. This mismatch of expectations created an aura of deep weirdness around the title that persists to this day. The emotional weight of the burning apartment segment extends far beyond its immediate horror elements. It introduces the theme of inherited trauma that runs through the entire game. Richard does not choose to enter this supernatural nightmare. He is dragged into it by the unfinished business of his father. The burning building represents the collapse of the domestic space, showing that no home is safe when dark secrets are left buried in the dark. As Richard steps out of his father's room and onto the deck of the ghost ship, he carries the burden of his father's mistakes with him. The contrast between the modern apartment and the old luxury ship highlights the spatial storytelling that From Software would later master. In the apartment, the space is cramped, messy and cluttered with the artifacts of a dying man's obsession. On the ship, the space is vast, cold, and unnervingly clean. Yet both locations are unified by the presence of the astral stone. The red light of the gem acts as a thread connecting different times, spaces, and human lives into a single tapestry of tragedy. As Richard recovers his balance on the creaking floorboards of the steamship, the immediate danger of the fire is replaced by a slow, creeping dread. The air smells of salt water, old leather, and stale tobacco. The low hum of the ship's engine vibrates through the soles of his shoes, even though there is no visible crew working the decks. The burning apartment was merely the spark that lit the fuse. Now, Richard stands at the entrance of a vast ocean liner floating outside of time itself, forced to uncover the truth behind the astral stone before the fire consumes his own soul. Chapter 2. Boarding the Orpheus. When Richard Osmond opens his eyes, the smell of smoke vanishes completely. Cold sea spray fills his lungs instead. The floor under his feet sways gently back and forth. Heavy iron beams groan against the weight of rolling ocean waves. Richard stands on the deck of the ocean liner named the Orpheus. The ship was supposed to have vanished at sea in 1913. Yet here it floats, entirely intact, trapped inside an endless sea of mist. The sky above is pitch black, devoid of stars or moon. Look over the wooden railing and you see only thick white fog. There is no shore in sight and no horizon anywhere. You are trapped inside a floating graveyard outside of normal time. The atmosphere hits you immediately through the first-person perspective. In 1998, most survival horror games used fixed camera angles. Games like Resident Evil placed cameras in the upper corners of rooms. That design felt like watching a scary movie from a safe distance. Echo Night took a completely different approach for its haunting journey. It locked the camera directly inside the protagonist's eyes at all times. You do not watch Richard walk down creepy hallways from afar. You walk down those dark hallways yourself, feeling every slow step. Every corner turn becomes a nerve-wracking moment of pure tension. You never know what is waiting in the darkness until you turn around. Moving through the ship feels heavy and deliberate on the controller. The original PlayStation controller did not feature analog sticks by default. Players used the directional pad to walk, turn, and look around. Turning your head required pressing a button and slowly panning left or right. This control scheme created an undeniable sense of physical sluggishness. Some players found the movement clunky and frustrating back in the late 90s. Yet, that exact sluggishness added immensely to the game's psychological horror. When a ghost glides toward you in the dark, you cannot turn quickly. You must slowly rotate your body like a real, panicking human being. The technical realities of the original PlayStation shaped this unique visual world. The console had only 2 megabytes of main system memory available. Processing detailed 3D spaces required massive technical tricks from video game developers. From Software could not render a massive, detailed ship with long viewing distances. If they tried to display too many objects, the frame rate crashed. Their solution was both a technical necessity and a brilliant artistic decision. They wrapped the entire exterior of the ship in thick, dark fog. The fog reduced the distance the console needed to render at once. It kept the game running smoothly while creating a suffocating atmosphere. This low-poly visual style has a strange effect on human psychology. On modern consoles, sharp graphics show you every detail with high clarity. Nothing is left to your imagination when graphics look totally realistic. On 32-bit hardware, textures were pixelated, blurry, and constantly warping. A simple coat rack in a dark hallway could look like a monster. A shadow on the wall could look like a lurking human face. Your brain constantly tries to fill in the missing visual details. This creates a state of active paranoia as you explore empty rooms. The low resolution makes the world feel like a fading, unstable memory. Inside the ship, the sound design does heavy lifting for atmospheric dread. There is very little music playing while you explore the hallways. Most of your journey is accompanied by ambient sound effects alone. You hear the rhythmic creaking of the ship's wooden hull. You hear the low rumble of engines coming from deep below decks. Water drips steadily from rusted ceiling pipes into small, dark puddles. Footsteps echo down empty corridors, echoing back at you with a slight delay. Sometimes, you hear a distant door slam shut somewhere on the deck above. You stop walking and listen closely, but no further sounds follow. The layout of the Orpheus feels like a real, functioning luxury vessel. You explore grand dining halls with dusty chandeliers hanging from high ceilings. You walk through narrow passenger corridors lined with identical numbered wooden doors. You visit a quiet shipboard casino filled with silent, motionless slot machines. Down below, you enter cold boiler rooms packed with heavy iron pipes. Each location feels authentic to early 20th century naval design and architecture. Yet every single room feels wrong because it is totally abandoned. The contrast between luxury and total emptiness creates a deep sense of unreality. As you explore, you quickly discover that you are not alone. The ship is populated by the lingering spirits of the passengers. These ghosts are not bloodthirsty monsters out to eat your brain. They are souls trapped in the moment of their tragic deaths. Many ghosts appear as shimmering, translucent figures standing motionless in dark corners. However, entering a dark room with an aggressive ghost is deadly. In total darkness, red glowing eyes appear out of the black shadow. The ghost glides toward you, draining your life force through touch alone. You cannot fight back with guns, knives, or magic spells. Your primary line of defense in Echo Night is surprisingly mundane. You must find the light switch in every room you enter. Flipping on the electric lights instantly banishes aggressive, hostile shadow spirits. Light neutralizes their power, turning dangerous phantoms into calm, talkative ghosts. This simple mechanic completely flips standard survival horror gameplay on its head. In games like Silent Hill, turning on a flashlight attracts deadly monsters. In Echo Night, bright light is your only absolute safe haven. Searching blindly along dark walls for a light switch creates intense panic. You fumble in the dark while an aggressive spirit slowly glides closer. The core puzzle loop revolves around time travel and emotional investigation. To help a peaceful ghost pass on, you must resolve their regrets. You do this by interacting with specific personal objects scattered around rooms. Touching an antique pocket watch or a pocket mirror triggers a flashback. The glowing red astral stone pulls Richard into the past before the tragedy. Suddenly, the dusty, abandoned room transforms into a bright living space. The lights are on, music plays, and living people walk around. You speak with passengers in 1913 to uncover their private secrets. These time travel sequences create a fascinating structural contrast within the game. One moment, you walk through a cold, rusted, ruined ship deck. The next moment, you stand inside a bustling, warm passenger lounge. You see the passengers drinking wine, playing cards, and making future plans. You know that every single person you speak with is already dead. You know their grand ocean liner is doomed to vanish into fog. This creates a heavy feeling of dramatic irony and deep sadness. You are not trying to save the ship from sinking into ocean depths. You are merely trying to give these forgotten passengers a peaceful rest. Consider the story of a young passenger named Mina. In the present, her ghost weeps quietly in an empty cabin. She refuses to speak with Richard and cowers away in fear. By stepping into a nearby painting, you travel back to 1913. You find Mina as a living teenager arguing with her father. Her father is obsessed with buying a strange red gem from a cellar. The gem has driven the father into a state of sudden madness. He locks his daughter away, ignoring her desperate pleas for safety. By solving this family argument in the past, you alter her spirit. When you return to the present, the room is quiet again. The weeping ghost girl looks up at Richard with a peaceful expression. She thanks you for reminding her of her father's true love. Her glowing spirit dissolves into tiny specks of warm blue light. Where her ghost once stood, she leaves behind an astral peace. These blue stone fragments represent purified human souls saved from eternal suffering. Richard must collect these astral pieces throughout his long journey on the ship. They are key items required to unlock doors and reach final areas. The game design uses physical space to reflect mental states of grief. Rooms inhabited by angry ghosts are dark, messy, and cold inside. Furniture is overturned and mirror glass is shattered across floor tiles. Rooms where ghosts have been saved feel bright, quiet, and still. The oppressive, scary atmosphere slowly relaxes as you free more passenger souls. You actively clean up the emotional rot left behind on the ship. The ship transforms from a terrifying haunted house into a quiet sanctuary. You are slowly putting an abandoned graveyard to rest, room by room. During the late 90s, this unique approach confused many mainstream game critics. Action games like Resident Evil 2 dominated gaming news and sales charts. Magazines expected survival horror games to feature high-octane zombie action and gore. Some reviewers criticized Echo Knight for its slow pacing and lack of weapons. They claimed the game was too quiet and lacked exciting combat encounters. Yet fans on early internet forums recognized something truly special in it. Usenet group threads and early forum boards praised the game's atmosphere. Players loved the deep focus on storytelling over mindless button mashing. Strange urban legends quickly began to grow around the game online. Because the game was rare, rumors spread across early fan websites. Some players claimed there was a secret room in the engine bay. They said entering a specific button code let you save the ship. Other rumors claimed you could find a working gun in the captain's safe. These myths were totally false, but they showed how deeply people engaged. Players wanted to believe there was more hiding inside that thick fog. The mysterious atmosphere invited wild fan theories and long online debates. The design choices in Echo Knight laid foundations for future gaming masterpieces. From Software learned how to tell stories through environmental details and item text. You do not watch long cinematic cutscenes to learn the plot. Instead, you read discarded diary entries, examine old portraits, and observe rooms. A dropped pocket watch tells a story without using any words at all. This subtle storytelling method became the signature style of director Hidetaka Miyazaki years later. The dark atmosphere of Demon's Souls drew directly from these early experiments. Looking back at 32-bit hardware reveals a fascinating artistic lesson today. High visual detail does not always equal a scarier gaming experience. The low poly edges of the Orpheus created an abstract nightmare landscape. The foggy corridors left space for human imagination to run wild inside. You felt like you were exploring a real ghost ship trapped in time. Every door you opened held a new tragedy waiting to be solved. As Richard steps deeper into the engine rooms, the stakes grow higher. The origin of the Red Stone is finally waiting in the dark. Chapter 3: The Tragedy of Souls. Most survival horror games from the 90s gave players shotguns, handguns, and grenade launchers. They taught you to fear dark corners because terrifying monsters waited to bite you. You measured your survival by counting remaining bullets and green herbs in your inventory. Echo Night completely rejected this standard action horror formula from the very beginning. It replaced shotguns with active listening and deep emotional empathy for broken lives. You cannot shoot a ghost with a handgun to make it disappear quickly. You cannot swing a heavy metal pipe to defend your fragile human body. The only way forward is understanding why these poor spirits remain trapped here. When you step into a dark room on the ship, panic sets in immediately. Shadows cling tightly to every single corner of the vintage wallpaper and high ceiling. Aggressive ghosts float through wooden floorboards, reaching out with glowing red eyes. Touching these shadow figures slowly drains your life force until you collapse completely. Your first instinct is to look along walls for a bright electric light switch. Flipping the switch bathes the dusty room in warm, golden electric light. The terrifying phantom instantly transforms into a calm, static human spirit standing nearby. Light does not kill these lost souls or force them away violently. It simply calms their extreme anger, allowing you to speak directly with them. This design choice flips standard video game horror tropes completely inside out. In most horror titles, bright light sources like flashlights make you easier to spot. In Echo Night, light brings absolute peace, safety, and clear human connection. Turning on a simple light switch feels like shining hope into a dark void. The static hum of electric light becomes your greatest shield against cold ocean madness. Once the light bulb burns bright, the real narrative work begins for Richard Osmond. You step forward, look into translucent eyes, and listen to heartbreaking human stories. Each ghost represents a real person who died carrying a heavy emotional burden. Every single passenger on the ocean liner carries a distinct, heartbreaking personal story. They are not random background extra characters put there to fill up space. They were real people with big dreams, deep fears, and broken family relationships. The red astral stone preyed on their deepest human weaknesses during their lives. It took cruel advantage of their secret desires, turning their dreams into eternal nightmares. To free a spirit, you must discover what holds them to this world. You must find lost personal belongings that link their souls to key memories. Consider the tragic story of the ship's talented, blind pianist sitting quietly in darkness. In the present timeline, his ghost lingers near a dusty, abandoned grand piano. The instrument is missing vital piano wire, leaving it completely dead and silent. The blind musician cannot play his favorite song to rest his tired mind. By stepping into a nearby painting, you travel backward through time once again. You enter the bright, luxurious ship lounge back in the year 1913. You locate the missing piano wire inside a forgotten storage cabinet nearby. You fix the instrument in the past, allowing the beautiful music to flow. When you return to the modern timeline, the environment changes in a noticeable way. Soft piano music echoes gently down long, empty wooden passenger corridors. The blind musician sits at the keys, playing a slow, breathtaking melody. He smiles softly toward Richard, thanking him for restoring his lost musical art. His translucent body slowly fades away into bright, glowing blue dust particles. He leaves behind a small polished blue gem known as an astral piece. These blue fragments represent human souls that have been restored to complete peace. You collect these blue pieces to unlock locked doors across the ship. Another deeply moving narrative involves two young lovers separated on the upper deck. The young man stands alone near the ship deck, weeping into cold darkness. His bride vanished right before the ship disappeared into the thick ocean mist. He believes she abandoned him forever because he was poor and penniless. Through time manipulation, you discover the dark truth behind her sudden departure. The woman was trapped inside a cold cargo hold by greedy collectors. The collectors were searching for the glowing red stone hidden in her trunk. You reunite the young pair by carrying a small silver pocket watch across timelines. Returning the watch to the young man clears away decades of bitter misunderstanding. He realizes his love never truly abandoned him in her heart at all. The heavy grief vanishes from his face as his spirit relaxes completely. The lovers float together into the warm sky, disappearing as one bright light. Moments like this turn Echo Night into a deeply emotional narrative experience. The game asks you to act as a counselor rather than a warrior. Collecting every astral piece creates the core progression loop of the entire game. Each piece acts as a key to reach new decks of the ship. The ship itself acts like a massive emotional puzzle waiting for full completion. You cannot simply rush to the captain's bridge and steer home safe. You must systematically heal every single tragic memory scattered across multiple This slow pacing forces players to reflect on every individual passenger's life. You learn their names, their professions, their families, and their deepest secrets. The game forces you to confront the harsh reality of death and loss directly. Most video games treat death as a simple reset screen or failure mechanic. Echo Night treats death as an inescapable permanent part of human existence. You cannot alter history enough to save the ocean liner from ultimate doom. You cannot prevent the ship from sinking into the foggy ocean void below. The passengers are already dead, and their physical bodies are long gone. Your only goal is helping their spirits find quiet acceptance and peace. This creates a rare, somber tone rarely seen in PlayStation-era titles. The contrast between red and blue stones carries heavy symbolic visual weight throughout. The red astral stone represents human greed, violence, and endless emotional destruction. It consumes human souls, trapping them inside dark, cold rooms filled with shadows. The blue astral pieces represent selfless compassion, forgiveness, and eternal spiritual release. Every time you turn a red stone corruption into a blue piece, hope grows. You are actively reversing the terrible evil done by the astral stone. You rebuild a shattered world using kindness instead of raw destructive force. This emotional weight is multiplied by the quiet sound design in these moments. When a spirit is finally freed, the heavy ambient noise stops completely. The low creaking of the ship's wooden frame fades into total silence. A single, pure chime rings out as the blue light appears on floorboards. This brief moment of absolute quiet offers immense mental relief to players. It breaks up the oppressive, constant tension of exploring the ghost ship. You feel a genuine sense of accomplishment for helping another human soul rest. Back in 1998, completing every ghost quest was notoriously tricky for most players. The game provided very few explicit map markers or detailed quest logs. You had to pay close attention to casual dialogue and written diary entries. If you missed a key item in the past, you could get stuck. This high difficulty spawned countless rumors on early retro gaming community message boards. Players debated online whether certain passengers could be saved or permanently lost forever. One popular urban legend focused on a mysterious child ghost in the library. Rumors claimed that making a wrong choice would doom the child forever. According to early forum posts, this bad choice locked you out entirely. Players believed it forced you into a dark ending without any warning. In reality, the game was much more forgiving than rumors suggested. You could always backtrack through time to fix your previous narrative mistakes. Yet the legend persisted because the game felt so atmospheric and unforgiving. Another persistent myth involved a secret hidden ghost in the engine room. Players claimed this ghost was the original builder of the ocean liner. Supposedly, finding his hidden body unlocked a secret golden astral piece. Strategy guide writers in late 90s magazines even printed conflicting information about this. Some guides claimed the golden piece let you fight the red stone directly. This urban legend arose because the engine room felt so massive and confusing. Players assume such a large, dark area must hide extra secret content. These community myths show how deeply players immersed themselves in the world. The mystery of the ship spilled over into real-world playground conversations. Players wanted to believe every room held deeper secrets waiting to be solved. They traded tips on how to save every soul without taking damage. The absence of easy internet guides made every discovery feel deeply magical. Finding a new passenger felt like uncovering a real historical secret on board. The physical design of the ship changes psychologically as you progress further. In the beginning, the Orpheus feels terrifying, hostile, and completely alien to walk. Darkness dominates every long corridor, and aggressive ghosts hide in many cabins. As you light up rooms and save spirits, the ship transforms slowly. Areas you previously feared become quiet, safe sanctuaries bathed in warm light. You can walk through cleared decks without any fear of incoming attack. The ship begins to feel less like a horror house and more like home. This spatial transformation mirrors the psychological journey of healing from heavy grief. Grief often feels like a dark, overwhelming, and terrifying ocean storm. It traps people inside dark memories, making progression feel totally impossible. By systematically facing each shadow, Richard clears away the lingering darkness step by step. You bring order back to a chaotic, shattered world lost in time. The low poly graphics and quiet corridors emphasize this meditative, peaceful feeling. You are not just surviving a nightmare, you are actively healing a tragedy. By the time you reach the upper decks, the atmosphere shifts completely. The scary horror elements give way to a deep, resonant melancholy feeling. You realize your time on the Orpheus is nearing its final conclusion. Every freed spirit brings you one step closer to facing the stone. The boat feels lighter, quieter, and ready to rest at last. Richard prepares to enter the captain's quarters for the final confrontation ahead. Chapter 4. From Software's Hidden DNA. Today, millions of players around the world know From Software for massive, challenging action games. Titles like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring dominate modern video game culture. Players praise these modern titles for their dark fantasy worlds, complex combat, and mysterious environmental storytelling. Yet, long before the studio conquered global markets, From Software built a very different legacy. During the late 90s, the Japanese studio was creating quiet, experimental games on original PlayStation hardware. They were testing bold ideas that would lay the technical and philosophical groundwork for their future masterpieces. To truly understand modern gaming history, we must travel back to the company's humble origins. We must examine how a quiet 1998 horror title contained the early creative DNA of an industry giant. The origin of From Software is one of the most surprising stories in the entire video game industry. The company was founded in Tokyo back in November 1986 by a businessman named Notoshi Zin. Surprisingly, the company did not start out making entertainment software or video games for children. For its first 8 years of existence, From Software developed boring office productivity programs for local businesses. They built specialized accounting software and farm management applications for Japanese agricultural companies. The programmers worked in quiet offices, typing code for spreadsheets rather than digital monsters. Everything changed in the early 90s when a severe economic recession hit the country of Japan. The leadership team realized they needed to pivot their core business model to survive in the changing market. During that exact same time period, Sony announced its plans to launch the original PlayStation console. The new console offered revolutionary 3D graphics hardware that fascinated young software engineers. Notoshi Zin decided to take a massive financial risk by pivoting his entire company toward video game development. The studio began working on a dark, first-person fantasy role-playing game for Sony's new hardware system. In December 1994, From Software released King's Field exclusively in Japan as a PlayStation launch window title. The game was dark, slow, and famously punishing to inexperienced players who wandered into dark caves. It featured real-time stamina bars, hidden walls, and zero tutorial pop-ups guiding your initial path forward. King's Field became a surprise financial success, proving that players enjoyed deep, unguided exploration inside dangerous digital spaces. From Software built a strong reputation for crafting immersive, first-person 3D worlds on home console hardware. However, the studio refused to stay inside a single genre or reuse the exact same formula repeatedly. The developers wanted to see how far they could stretch their custom 3D game engine technology. They began experimenting with different types of digital experiences, including giant mecha action in Armored Core. By 1998, a talented internal development team decided to tackle the popular survival horror genre from a brand new perspective. They began working on a slow, narrative-focused horror project titled Echo Night. The core concept behind Echo Night was born out of a fascinating creative experiment inside the studio. The development team wanted to remove traditional weapon combat completely from the gameplay experience. In games like King's Field, players spent hours swinging swords and firing magic spells at dangerous fantasy beasts. In Echo Night, the player would have no physical weapons or magic spells to protect their human body. Instead, the game would rely entirely on mood, environmental investigation, and quiet emotional interactions with lost spirits. The developers took the underlying 3D engine mechanics from King's Field and pointed them towards psychological storytelling. They traded heavy fantasy dungeons for the creaking, waterlogged interior of a ruined luxury steamship. Looking closely at Echo Night reveals many mechanical design choices that connect directly to modern From Software games. The first-person perspective locked your vision, creating an intense feeling of physical vulnerability in tight spaces. The slow character turning speed forced players to move deliberately through dark, narrow hallways. You could not turn around instantly to run away from a lurking phantom in the shadows. This sluggish movement speed made every physical room feel dangerous and heavy with atmospheric tension. The developers understood that fear comes from a lack of physical control inside an unfamiliar environment. They used mechanical limitations to build psychological dread without relying on constant jump scares or gory violence. The game design philosophy also pioneered the studio's famous approach to environmental storytelling. In modern games like Dark Souls, the narrative is rarely explained through long, animated cutscenes or simple dialogue dumps. Players must piece together the deep history of the world by examining item descriptions and broken architecture. Echo Night used this exact same subtle storytelling technique back in the late 90s on PlayStation hardware. The story of the doomed ship, Orpheus, is told through scattered diary pages, discarded letters, and personal items. You learn about a passenger's tragic life by examining a broken pocket watch sitting on a dusty table. The virtual environment itself carries the heavy burden of the historical narrative. The physical layout of the ghost ship reflects the complex, interconnected world design that From Software would perfect years later. The Orpheus is not a series of simple, linear hallways connected end to end in a straight line. The ocean liner functions like a massive, vertical 3D dungeon filled with locked doors and hidden shortcuts. You explore multiple passenger decks, cargo holds, boiler rooms, and grand dining halls across different temporal timelines. Unlocking a new door often creates a helpful shortcut back to previously explored safe areas of the ship. This spatial design forces the player to construct a clear mental map of the entire vessel over time. It creates a satisfying sense of physical mastery over a once terrifying and alien location. The thematic roots of Echo Knight also dive deep into ideas of human obsession, corruption, and spiritual decay. In the Dark Souls series, powerful kingdoms fall into ruin because their leaders refuse to accept natural decay and death. In Echo Knight, the red astral stone acts as a physical metaphor for destructive human desire and greed. The stone promises to fulfill human wishes, but it ultimately consumes the souls of everyone who touches it. The ship Orpheus becomes a floating monument to human weakness, trapped inside an endless, foggy purgatory outside of time. This focus on decaying worlds and tragedy born from human pride became the foundational thematic signature of the entire studio. The emotional structure of side quests in Echo Knight directly prefigures the tragic character arcs in modern From Software titles. In most traditional role-playing games, completing a quest for a non-player character solves their problems completely and happily. In Echo Knight, helping a lost ghost find peace does not undo the tragic reality of their past death. You cannot save the passengers from the sinking ship or alter their ultimate physical fate in history. You can only listen to their regrets, offer brief comfort, and allow their spirits to pass on quietly. This bittersweet, melancholic tone separates From Software narratives from standard heroic video game power fantasies. During the late 90s, From Software entered a golden age of experimental game design on original PlayStation hardware. Beside King's Field and Echo Knight, the studio created dark, experimental games like Shadow Tower in 1999. Shadow Tower was an even darker, more claustrophobic dungeon crawler that removed background music entirely to heighten player isolation. These late 90s titles served as a creative incubator for the young software developers working inside the Tokyo studio. They were constantly pushing hardware boundaries, testing unconventional gameplay mechanics, and ignoring mainstream gaming trends. They built a unique design identity centered around trust in the player's patience and intelligence. As Echo Knight gained a small cult following, strange urban legends began to circulate across early gaming communities. In the late 90s, early internet forums like GameFAQs became popular gathering places for passionate retro gamers. Players shared secret gameplay tips, written walkthroughs, and wild fan theories about obscure Japanese import games. A popular rumor began to spread that Echo Knight was secretly connected to the King's Field universe. Fans noticed that both game series featured ancient, corrupted artifacts capable of twisting human desires into dark monsters. Some players claimed the red astral stone was created by the same dark dragons mentioned in King's Field lore. Another widespread urban legend claimed that players could find the famous Moonlight Sword hidden somewhere inside the ghost ship. The Moonlight Sword is a legendary glowing blade that appears in almost every single From Software title in history. It appears in King's Field, Armored Core, Otogi, Ninja Blade, Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne. Rumors on early message boards insisted that solving every passenger puzzle without taking damage unlocked a secret room in the engine bay. According to the rumor, inside this hidden room, Richard could pick up the glowing green sword to fight ghosts directly. Players spent hundreds of hours searching every corner of the ship, looking for hidden buttons on walls. In reality, the Moonlight Sword never makes a physical appearance inside the original Echo Knight video game. The developers deliberately left out traditional weapons to preserve the game's non-violent, atmospheric focus on quiet narrative investigation. However, the legacy of the glowing blade lives on spiritually inside the glowing blue astral pieces you collect. These blue stone fragments glow with a serene light that purifies dark corruption, echoing the magical light of the iconic blade. The myth of the hidden sword persisted for years simply because fans expected From Software to include their favorite Easter egg. The rumor showed how deeply players wanted to connect the studio's growing library of games together. A second persistent urban legend involved a hidden developer room located inside the lower cargo hold of the ship. Internet posts claimed that inputting a complex button code on the title screen unlocked a secret modern office door. Inside this secret room, players supposedly found low-poly 3D models of the development team sitting at work desks. The secret developers would speak directly to the player, offering funny commentary on the game's difficult production history. While From Software did include quirky secrets in later titles, no such developer room exists within Echo Knight game code. Data miners who extracted the game's files decades later confirmed that no hidden modern office assets exist on the disk. These community urban legends highlight a fascinating psychological truth about early From Software video games. Their games felt so quiet, mysterious, and atmospheric that players genuinely believed anything was possible inside their virtual worlds. In an era before instant walkthrough videos, dark digital spaces invited endless player imagination and wild speculation. The cryptic narrative design made every strange texture or silent hallway feel like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Players did not view game environments as static digital levels designed by programmers. They treated these virtual spaces as living, historical places filled with buried secrets and forgotten lore. The creative director and designer Toshifumi Nabeshima played a crucial role in shaping these early experimental From Software titles. Nabeshima would later go on to direct major entries in the Armored Core franchise and other key studio projects. His work on Echo Knight demonstrated a profound understanding of pacing, suspense, and emotional restraint in game design. He recognized that quiet moments of reflection are just as powerful as high-octane action sequences in holding a player's attention. This commitment to artistic vision over commercial trends defined the internal culture of From Software throughout its long history. Looking back at Echo Knight through a modern lens reveals its true historical significance within the video game medium. Today, game historians recognize Echo Knight as an early pioneer of modern first-person narrative adventure games. Games like Dear Esther, Gone Home, Soma, and What Remains of Edith Finch owe a heavy creative debt to this 1998 title. Decades before the term walking simulator was ever coined by game critics, From Software proved that exploring a quiet environment to uncover human stories was compelling. They proved that video games could evoke deep sadness, quiet mystery, and gentle empathy without relying on constant violence. When we trace the direct line from 1998 to the present day, the evolution of From Software feels remarkably consistent. The studio did not radically change its core game design philosophy when it achieved global success with Dark Souls. They simply refined and expanded the exact same design principles they had been testing for over 15 years. The environmental storytelling, the interconnected level design, the haunting soundscapes, and the deep trust in player agency were all present in Echo Knight. The creaking floorboards of the Orpheus laid the emotional and mechanical foundation for the towering castles of Lordran and the lands between. As Richard Osmond steps deeper into the dark heart of the ship, we see a studio coming into its own. Echo Knight remains a fascinating, quiet masterpiece from an era when 3D game design was still wild and undiscovered. It stands as proof that great game design does not depend on massive budgets or hyper-realistic graphical fidelity. True atmospheric horror comes from quiet spaces, compelling human stories, and the dark shadows left behind in our minds. In the next section, we will examine the final confrontation at the end of this journey, exploring the multiple endings and the lasting legacy of the Astral Stone. Chapter 5: The Red Stone's Final Choice. Richard Osmond stands at the highest deck of the ocean liner. The cold ocean wind blows across the open wooden deck with a low howl. Below him lies a graveyard of quiet passenger rooms and healed memories. He has walked through dark hallways and listened to forgotten ghosts for hours. Now, the final door stands directly in front of him at the end of the hall. Behind this heavy iron door sits the private captain's quarters. Inside waits the ultimate secret of the ship named the Orpheus. The air feels heavy and uncomfortably warm near the keyhole. A dark red light shines through the small cracks around the wooden doorframe. Richard takes a deep breath and slowly turns the cold brass handle. Inside the room, normal time seems to stop moving completely. Shadows dance across old wooden walls like living figures in the dim room. In the center of the room stands his father, Edward Osmond. Edward looks pale, tired, and deeply broken by his long journey. Beside Edward stands a wealthy, stern man named William Rockwell. Rockwell was a prominent passenger on the original 1913 voyage of the ship. In his hands, Rockwell clutches the complete red astral stone tightly. The gem pulses with a deep, sickly crimson heartbeat across the carpet. It casts long, unnatural shadows across the plush red floorboards. This red stone is the true source of all the misery on board. William Rockwell brought the cursed stone onto the ocean liner back in 1913. He was a man consumed by endless greed and personal ambition. He believed the stone would grant him eternal life and unlimited financial wealth. Instead, the stone slowly corrupted his human mind and destroyed his body. It turned his secret desires into a waking nightmare for everyone nearby. The stone fed on the passengers' fears, dragging the ship out of time. Now, Rockwell stands trapped inside his own dark obsession for eternity. He refuses to give up the gem even as it consumes his soul. Edward Osmond spent his entire life searching for this exact location. He wanted to break the ancient curse that plagued his family line. However, Edward was also tempted by the stone's terrifying magical power. The gem whispered fake promises of bringing back his lost loved ones. Edward stands torn between destroying the artifact and giving in to dark temptation. Richard realizes that his father cannot complete this heavy task alone. The ultimate responsibility of choosing the future rests entirely on Richard's shoulders. The player must make crucial decisions that determine the final fate of everyone. The narrative climax of Echo Night offers no traditional final boss fight. You do not dodge incoming physical attacks or shoot glowing weak spots. Instead, the final confrontation plays out as a series of heavy moral choices. Your decisions throughout the entire game determine which narrative options are available. If you make the wrong choices in dialogue, dark corruption wins instantly. The game tests your understanding of human nature and selfless love. You must decide whether to save your father, destroy the stone, or surrender. Each decision leads to a dramatically different resolution for the tragic narrative. If Richard gives in to temptation, the dark ending unfolds rapidly. Richard reaches out and claims the glowing red stone for himself. He believes he can control its ancient power without losing his mind. The red light instantly flares, blinding Richard and filling the quiet room. The stone's parasitic corruption flows directly into his body and soul. His human heart turns cold, consumed by endless greed and selfish desire. Richard becomes the new guardian of the cursed astral stone forever. He remains trapped on the ghost ship, sailing through foggy darkness for eternity. If Richard destroys the stone without saving all the ghosts, a bittersweet ending occurs. Richard rejects the stone's power and manages to shatter the red gem. The dark curse holding the ship outside of time breaks instantly. The ghostly ship disappears into the ocean fog, leaving Richard back in his modern apartment. He is alive, but a heavy sadness lingers over his life. Because he failed to free every trapped passenger, their spirits remain lost. He lives out his days wondering if he could have done more to help. To unlock the true ending, you must achieve something truly extraordinary during your journey. You must locate every single one of the 26 trapped passenger spirits. You must solve their personal grief, grant their final wishes, and heal their pain. By doing so, you convert every red corruption into a glowing blue astral piece. These blue pieces represent purified human souls filled with peace and love. When Richard enters the captain's quarters with all blue pieces, the room transforms. The heavy darkness cannot survive inside the presence of so much light. With all 26 souls purified, the blue light completely overpowers the red stone. The red gem shatters into dust, destroying the ancient curse forever. Edward Osmond smiles at his son, his mind finally freed from dark obsession. The ghosts of the Orpheus appear one last time on the upper deck. They stand together under a clear, starry night sky, looking out over calm waters. They bow toward Richard in deep gratitude before dissolving into bright light. The ocean liner finally finds peace, sinking quietly into the deep ocean. Richard wakes up back in his father's city apartment in the present day. The burning fire is gone, replaced by a quiet, warm morning sun. Sunlight streams through the dusty windows, illuminating his father's wooden desk. Edward Osmond is there, sitting quietly with a peaceful expression on his face. Father and son are reunited, freed from the dark burden of their ancestors. The ancient curse that haunted their family for generations is broken forever. Richard steps outside into the bustling city, knowing he gave peace to 26 forgotten lives. The game also includes subtle narrative variations based on how you interact with Edward. If you choose to hand the stone over to your father, tragedy follows immediately. Edward collapses under the weight of the stone's dark energy, dying in Richard's arms. Richard is forced to destroy the stone alone, returning home without his father. This tragic variation emphasizes the themes of loss and personal consequences. Every action you take carries real weight, shaping the emotional outcome of the story. From software designed these multiple paths to reward careful exploration and thoughtful decision-making. The existence of 4 distinct endings sparked wild theories among early retro gamers. During the early 2000s, message boards were filled with rumors about a secret 5th ending. Players claimed that solving specific puzzles within a strict time limit altered history completely. According to the myth, this secret path allowed you to save the Orpheus from sinking. The ship would dock safely in New York in 1913, changing the past forever. Players spent years testing strange button combinations and searching hidden rooms for this ending. Modern game preservers and data miners eventually investigated these long-standing community rumors. By extracting the game's code and dialogue files, they thoroughly analyzed every path. They proved definitively that no 5th ending exists on the game disc. The developers never coded a scenario where the ship survives its ocean voyage. The sinking of the ship remains a historical certainty within the game's narrative logic. You cannot prevent physical death. You can only heal the spiritual pain left behind. The myth persisted because players desperately wanted a completely happy ending for everyone. Another famous urban legend centered on a cancelled high-definition remake of the original game. Rumors claimed that From Software was secretly developing a modern version for PlayStation 3. Fans believed the project was scrapped to focus entirely on Demon's Souls in 2009. While From Software did revisit the franchise, they never developed a remake of the original title. Instead, they expanded the series in unexpected directions, taking the core concepts to new settings. These persistent rumors highlight how deeply the original game captured the imagination of horror fans. The story of Echo Knight did not end on the decks of the Orpheus. In 1999, From Software released a direct sequel titled Echo Knight 2, Nimu no Yukusaki. Released exclusively in Japan for the PlayStation, the sequel explored a Gothic mansion setting. Players controlled a new protagonist searching for his missing girlfriend inside a haunted estate. The game refined the first-person mechanics, light switch safety zones, and emotional ghost puzzles. Western players relied on fan translation patches years later to experience this lost Japanese horror gem. In 2004, From Software brought the franchise into the modern era with Echo Knight Beyond. Released on the PlayStation 2, this sci-fi horror game moved the setting to outer space. Players explored a ruined research station on the moon after a space shuttle crash. You wore an astronaut suit, monitoring your heart rate while avoiding terrifying ghostly phantoms. The game replaced the luxury ocean liner with cold, metallic space station corridors. Yet it retained the same core philosophy of quiet investigation, environmental storytelling, and emotional healing. Because Echo Knight received a limited North American release in 1998, physical copies became rare. As From Software achieved global fame with Dark Souls, interest in their early games exploded. Today, original PlayStation copies of Echo Knight are highly sought after by retro collectors. Sealed or complete copies sell for hundreds of dollars on second-hand collector markets. Retro gaming preservers have worked hard to archive the game for future generations of players. It stands as a prized treasure among survival horror enthusiasts worldwide. Looking back at the complete arc of Echo Knight, its artistic legacy is undeniable. The game proved that first-person exploration could deliver deep emotional power and quiet horror. Its influence echoes through modern psychological horror games and narrative adventure titles. Furthermore, it reveals the creative roots of From Software long before they became an industry giant. The themes of human desire, tragic decay, and environmental mystery began on that foggy ghost ship. The lesson of the astral stone remains clear. True peace comes from letting go of greed. As the fog clears over the cold ocean, the story of Echo Knight comes to a quiet end. Richard Osmond's journey reminds us that horror is not just about monsters and gore. True horror lies in unresolved grief, broken relationships, and the weight of our choices. By listening to the dead, Richard healed the past and restored his own future. The ocean liner Orpheus may be gone, resting quietly beneath dark waters. Yet its haunting story continues to shine bright, guiding players through the dark like a warm light switch.